أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على رسولنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وأتباعه وسلم.
Okay, assalamu alaikum everyone. So last time we had read the 23rd word, second chapter. We were discussing the I guess the two aspects of I guess our reality. One was our relationship to the significant members, which were the qualities, if you will, and the valuable programs, which we, or I guess I understood that to be as the kind of the method or the relationship between myself and other creation and existence. So as far as I can remember, I think we wanted to discuss a particular paragraph, or at a high level we briefly discussed the areas where it mentions, if however then he nurtures the seed of his abilities with the water of Islam and light of belief. Personally, I have questions on this paragraph, but before I pose my questions, I guess I would like to open the floor to anyone else to raise any questions or comments from that paragraph onwards, or anything prior to that. Okay. So my particular question to the group was, again, like, what does it mean that we are nurturing our abilities with the water of Islam and light of belief, and these two things are it seems as if the author has kept both of these two things or has mentioned these two things separate from one another, but while they're not completely separable, I would like to understand what it means by water of Islam and light of belief. Would anyone like to add their understanding or their takeaways from those two phrases, the water of Islam and light of belief?
I can take a brief attempt. I remember before we sort of mentioned, every time the author uses the word and, it's really i.e., that is. So we can work it out this way. So the water of Islam, that is the light of belief. So we can just then focus on light of belief. Then he goes on saying, under the soil of worship and servitude to God. So I'm thinking, definitely if I conclude something, if I make something out of my experiences here, then I may be getting somewhere as far as making sense of my existence is concerned. And so when you conclude something, obviously there's some work that goes into reaching a conclusion. So the author uses the word, he nurtures the seed. So obviously so let's say you're solving an equation, you're given a math problem, and you're given a couple of variables, so you kind of need to work them out together and then come to a conclusion. Or let's say you're solving or you're proving something like a theorem or something, so you kind of work out whatever you're given. So you have whatever you're given, and then you're kind of doing something and to reach a conclusion. And that's what I understand thus far, but I'm sure there's more that is meant here, but this should be a start. So if anyone want to jump in with this, that would be great.
It's also interesting how I kind of reread that particular sentence, and I guess since the author is probably tying it to the analogy, right? The seed, what does the seed really need? It needs water, it needs light. And as the author mentions, that seed of his abilities. So what do our abilities need? I think our abilities need, in a way, they need guidance is one word, but perhaps nurturing, training, opportunities. And I guess with that, if I was to kind of decode what water of Islam, or that is light of belief, could mean, in relation to my abilities, I would understand purity, basically, in the sense that without polluting my abilities, how am I basically utilizing them? And then utilizing them how is the follow-up question. And basically, I think that's what the author is trying to address when he says, under the soil of worship and servitude to God. So what does soil of worship mean in this instance? And I guess for me, as I understand it, is acknowledgement. So practicing my abilities while being conscious or acknowledging perhaps the giver of those abilities, and as well as using those abilities to fulfill the purpose of having those abilities to begin with. So if one was to do that, that is, again, stepping out of the analogy now, conform to the commands of the Quran, as the author states. If one was to use their abilities, quote unquote, under the soil of worship, then are we able to produce branches? Then are we able to grow? And I think that makes sense, again, because we're nurturing our abilities. And if anything, what nurture means is to I guess, provide the right environment for growth, for the development of our abilities. Anyone has any thoughts, questions on that?
So I guess the aim is to increase what we have, and so nurturing in this case is increasing in size or magnitude, whatever. So how am I going to increase it? So it is with the water of Islam, with the light of belief. So what I understand out of that is whatever I gain as conclusion with my belief, I see that the qualities that are given to me are going to increase. Practically speaking, let's say I observe some mercy within myself. So how is this mercy going to increase? Because if I attribute it to myself, it will go into the first category. It will just rot under the earth. Because it's mine, it happened to be mine, and it's going to die with me. But if I take it as it is given to me, then that means there is a merciful one. So I am just a mirror of this. So therefore, I can experience more of mercy as if it is mine, in essence, because the mercy that I'm experiencing right now is not mine anyways, but I have a first-hand experience of this mercy. But then once I realize that it is not my mercy, but I'm just being manifest with mercy, then I can extrapolate it. And when I see, for example, on top of a mountain, a rabbit is being mercifully nurtured, then I can enjoy the mercy right there as well. So my ability of being merciful is now nurtured, increased, because now I'm attributing it to the true source. So I guess this can be applied to any human quality.
You used the word enjoy. Can you elaborate on what you mean by enjoy?
So I am enjoying, so in a sense, existence is something in itself which gives me joy. I don't know why, but this is how it happens to be. But if I take it in the first category, the existence that I experience is very much discrete, meaning that every moment I die. All the things that I experience, they come to an end. But I have a desire for eternity, so the eternal joy I am after. So I would like to experience the existence eternally. And mercy is just an example of a manifestation of existence on me. So but my personal mercy is very small. So if I can raise my head to a global understanding of mercy, a comprehensive, a universal, not global, a universal mercy, then I would be able to really have much, much more of a joy. So this is going to be nurturing. I don't know if this had been an answer.
Right. So would it be fair to say that to enjoy something or to exist in a state of joy with something basically means to have a level of understanding in which one feels, I guess, peaceful or satisfactory in with their existence, I guess. And the reason why I'm asking that is if we read the next sentence, or I guess the later half of that paragraph, which is, he will be a seed of great value. And again, this is after one, uses, or after one conforms to the commands of Quran, and after they produce the branches and buds in the world of similitude and intermediate realm, then author states, he will be a seed of great value and a shining machine containing members of an everlasting tree and permanent truth, which will be the means of innumerable perfections and bounties in paradise. He will be a blessed and luminous fruit of the tree of the universe. So it basically, I guess, what that later half of that paragraph tells me is that to exist with this level of consciousness and understanding, one exists in that joyful state. One exists in that state of realization where, they could feel that they're quote unquote blessed, and that we can dig deeper into what that means. But that's what I'm understanding so far. Does anyone have any different thoughts on this or additional thoughts or concerns?
I simply, maybe my understanding is very simplistic, but if man is like a seed and we have some sort of potentiality, what I understand from the water of Islam, light of belief, and the soil of worship, especially the water of Islam, there should be some sort of guidance in the teachings about myself and my faculties and potentialities that I have, that will be unfolded under the teaching of the revelation, and technically teaching me who I am, and also understanding my own potentialities and what purpose they should be used for. So going through that education is the water that makes helps human being to unfold those potentialities. So what it means in practical sense, as he was referring in the following analogy that he talked about, the examples that he gave, I think that's what's explained there, how each of those potentialities should be used and unfolded in a way that will produce the belief and worship.
Would you say that the potentialities must be unfolded to produce the belief and worship, or the other way around, where in developing belief, as we understand, and in developing worship or understanding, or I guess acknowledging it, which is how I understand worship to be, then the person is unfolding, if unfolding is the right word to use here, or developing their abilities, or does it not even matter which one comes first?
I would say one has to sow the seed in order for the plant or tree to grow. So one has to cultivate the potentialities so that it yields some kind of result or fruit. So I guess the more one cultivates their potentialities, the better they are able to see light, I would say, if that makes any sense.
So I'm not, to answer Qasim's question, I am not sure if it really matters which one comes first. Maybe actually they like go hand in hand. On one side, like the more you, like the deeper you get in understanding of belief, I guess like it will help you to like know yourself better. But at the same time, when you grasp your own like being as an like human being, and understand those potentialities and faculties that you have, so each faculty that you have will also have its own specific kind of worship, and like that you should be like, one should be putting in practice. So I don't really know if like one comes before the other.
Right. Does anyone have any other or additional thoughts? I'm still thinking about this. So I would like to know if anyone has anything else to add.
Can you repeat the question? Assalamu alaikum. Sorry about that.
Somebody's late. Assalamu alaikum.
Yeah, I am sorry.
So the question that we're trying to address here, Asim, and correct me if I'm skipping anything else, is, I guess a statement was made where how I understood that to be was that one must kind of produce so by the way, we're reading from the third last paragraph on page 331, and the, where it mentions that once kind of a person develops their abilities with the water of Islam and light of belief, as a result of that, they will produce branches and buds in the world of similitude. So the statement that we were trying to address was, does one's abilities result in the increase of the light of belief or the water of Islam, as the text states, or is it the other way around, where the water of Islam and the light of belief is put first in order to develop one's abilities? And I guess with the caveat of, does it not even matter which one comes first? So far what's been said, I'm going to quickly try to recap. Fariha said that, and correct me if I'm wrong again, Fariha, that the light and the water is necessary first. After you plant the seed, those things have to come first in order for the seed to grow. So you cannot have a seed producing branches or buds until that light of belief or water of Islam is kind of, I guess, casted onto the seed. And from a exemplary standpoint, or I don't know what's the right term for non-analogy perspective, that would basically mean that whatever abilities that I have, I can only develop them through the light of belief, basically through developing my understanding and acknowledgement of who I am and who my I guess creator must be, that leads to my growth, or leads to the growth of my abilities.
Yeah, thank you for that recap. So yeah, I'm reading the sentence again. So I'm seeing that like we discussed how the seed is under the soil. And so he says again, under the soil of worship, which I think is equal to the servitude of God. So everything is done in the analogy of man being like a seed under the soil, where he is being exposed to all different sorts of situations and events. So that's, if as man using his free choice and the ability to choose and with all his faculties and senses and feelings, that if man is able to, as it says, and I think you probably touched on it also, that nurturing that particular within, that's the seed, which is man. He's nurturing all his abilities and qualities. And how is he nurturing? With whatever, just like the seed gets exposed to the water and that helps it grow. Same thing, man is exposed to different situations and circumstances where he gets to exercise his faculties and his abilities. And that's how man gets stronger and gets nurtured and is able to develop. And I don't think maybe the water of Islam and light of belief goes hand in hand probably. But the focus I'm trying to understand here is that within this world, I, as a human being, should be able to nurture my faculties and direct them appropriately, use them accordingly with the guidance that I need to have a better kind of connection with my source of existence. So that's how I see the water of Islam being worked on my being and that's how I am exposed to also the light of Islam. As I grow and I somehow also understand more and develop my abilities to understand that there must be some source that is behind all this. So that's how that light of belief becomes worship, which is also the servitude to God.
So, as I was thinking about this, I think one main reason why I'm struggling a lot with this particular analogy, and even though the analogy is really good, but if I may propose a different example or analogy, of a carpenter, basically. So if I am a human being and I find myself with 3 tools, let's say a woodcutter, some hammers, and nails. And these 3 things, these 3 tools, for the sake of linking it back to the analogy, these are abilities. And if I just use hammer and a woodcutter and nails just, repeatedly in different ways without any guidance from anyone, without anyone saying, this is the best way to do it, this is how to use a woodcutter, this is how, I don't know, you hammer and nail into it. So to a certain extent, with the ability itself, I guess it becomes almost obvious how one can use it, but not how one can use it in its best potential. So if I just use the hammer, the woodcutter, and the nails without any proper guidance from, let's say, someone who's a more skilled carpenter, I can never say that I am a skilled carpenter, or that I've mastered the art of carpentry. I can say I might know how to use these things to an extent that I've discovered them, but not to the extent of what their potential is. So I guess, I might think that a hammer is only used for hammering the nails, but I might discover that, or someone might educate me to say that, you know what, you can put a hammer on a woodcutter and it might be easier to cut the wood next time. So perhaps the potential of that ability enhances with the right guidance. And because, I guess, of using my own, I guess, abilities, or the abilities that I find myself with, I can experience that I'm not using them to the best potential, and that because I find myself with these abilities, that there must be, that guidance. There must be that, I guess, guidance is probably the only word I can think of right now. Guidance provided as well, as I find myself in need of using these tools, as I find myself in need of excelling in the skill set of carpentry, or as I find myself in need of wanting to put a wooden house together. So personally, for me, this analogy or example that I gave makes more sense to me, in the sense that I must, the quote unquote light of belief or water of Islam, aka, or the guidance must be there for me before I start using these, in order for me to use these abilities to their utmost, highest potential.
Yeah, that makes sense also in terms of like the analogy you said in terms of the abilities. However, I also think that the seed example, because the seed grows and it gets out of the soil, right? So there's a connection being made there also, I think, in the paragraph where, it will produce buds and branches and buds in the world of similitudes and the intermediate realm and the everlasting part. So yeah, so I don't know how you will go from the other analogy to the permanent and everlasting, which the seed and the tree example kind of helps me much more. And we're not going to dispute on which analogy is better, but I think in terms of the abilities, the carpenter example is perfect. But in terms of connecting it to the everlasting and permanence that human beings are seeking, then I think this seed example works much better.
Right. Yeah, no, I was just reading in the next paragraph, and I did find the limitations of the analogy that I gave to be limiting. So yeah, if anyone has any other questions or comments on on this particular paragraph, please ask or say before we move on to the next one. Okay. In the next paragraph, what really draws my attention is that the I guess importance or emphasis on the word true. So I'll read the sentence for everyone. Yes, true progress is to turn the faces of the heart, spirit, intellect, and even the imagination and other subtle faculties given to man towards eternal life, for each to be occupied with the particular duty of worship worthy of it. Again, I think that's a very heavy point that's being made across. One, the emphasis on true progress. So, which basically, the first thing that I question with that is that, okay, what other kind of progress can there be? The progress that I might define as progress, and I think that's what we kind of briefly touched upon in our last discussion. Like what is actual progress? Is it the material, growth or progress in terms of our human nature or humanity, addressing the needs of humanity? So I guess I kind of inject that it must be the humanity growth or humanity progress when the author states true progress. And then how that true progress comes into play is, again, turning the faces of heart, spirit, and intellect, and even imagination. So what is the faces of heart, spirit, and intellect mean here? And I think that's direction, right? Like which direction are we utilizing our heart, and not, again, the material heart, but the perhaps desire, our intellect, and even our imagination, even I guess where we want things to be. So as long as we're directing those things and our other faculties towards eternal life, and again, that raises another question, like what is that eternal life here? I guess, does anyone have any thoughts on how one can direct these faculties towards eternal life?
I don't want to take the discussion off the subject and steer it to a different direction, but I'm going to play devil's advocate for a second. So when this paragraph says, yes, true progress is to turn the faces of the heart, spirit, intellect, and even the imagination and other subtle faculties given to man towards eternal life, for each to be occupied with particular duty of worship worthy of it. So like, and when you were talking, like you refer to like progress not in terms of like material sense, but it is more like a spiritual one, I think. So whatever that paragraph means, I don't know if I really truly experienced this, but like when we look at the different alternatives in life, how many of us really, let's put it this way, like like Prophet Muhammad came to enlighten the people in the peninsula of Saudi Arabia. And in today's society, how many of us really turn our faces to Saudi Arabia as an source seeking for some sort of progress? And like, given the fact that all of us here, like living in this country, being the capitalist country that is the capital of like the world in that sense, how many of us would be really willing to make that kind of change if material progress is not part of it? In other words, like, would you be really going to a society that has no material progress whatsoever, and like at least having the open mind to listen to them, to see what they have to say? Isn't that part of the actually like the progress as a, not as an individual, but in terms of a social life, as a Medeniya culture, civilization, as a civilization? Like, how can you really think that actually like the civilization in the Middle East in general actually has something to offer to you to enlighten your mind, your heart, and your spirit by just looking at the way like the societies are?
I think the question is going to be a little bit misleading if we talk about Middle East versus West. Because
this is like not Middle East versus West. Let's put it this way: take the names, like materialistically developed civilization versus not developed civilizations. Let's put it that way.
So I guess again it's going to be misleading because now we are comparing materialistically developed civilization versus a civilization which is not materially developed, neither it is developed eternally. I mean, in terms of eternal life. So it's not developed at all in any respect. So, I mean, why shall I buy one for the other? So, I mean, one is bad, the other one is even worse, maybe. So I guess the comparison in here is, so I have this desire for eternity, and also I am given with some qualities which has the capacity to eternally flourish. But on the other hand, there's this other aspect of me which is to consume those given qualities and rot them. So today's society, the civilization, is offering me the second option, just for like the flame of a match. When you just strike the match, for a few seconds you have this flame. Maybe you enjoy the sight of the flame, but then it disappears. It dies for good. It's gone. So today's civilization is offering me this sort of lights, this sort of flames, which is temporary. Temporarily, I'm going to enjoy it, but that's it. So the question is, this hurts me. How am I going to get out of that? This alternative of this is not to not strike the match at all, which is the other side of the world. I mean, neither materially nor immaterially, I mean, in terms of eternal life, developed civilization, nothing at all. So forget about that. But the comparison in here is to find a light source which is going to be sustainable, not like a match, but a sustainable light source, to use a metaphor again. So I guess this eternal life, meaning that I have this living feeling of love, and this feeling of love is being hurt very badly in this civilization. I mean, practically speaking, take the example of if you love your friend, if you love a person, if you love your mother, you're getting hurt. And or if you love a certain car, next year a new car is going to come up. So it's being very badly hurt, although all different sorts and colors of cars are being introduced. Each and every new car is again hurting the feeling itself. So the question is, how am I going to then flourish this feeling instead of turning it into a torture for myself? And I guess once I ask this question, then I would find the answer is likely to be found in the direction that the material, meaning that anything that has an end, doesn't satisfy this feeling. So I should look for something that goes beyond. Afterlife meaning something that goes beyond the matter itself. But I don't think it has, it's going to be fair to say that there is a civilization on Earth today which is favoring afterlife out there somewhere, and I am choosing this civilization over that other civilization. I think practically this is not the case.
All right, thank you for the comments. I think both the statements that were made are pretty interesting because, again, it kind of puts the emphasis on the eternal life aspect of things as well as the true progress. And I was, as the brother mentioned the statement as to like, how come, true progress cannot be attained by perhaps looking towards a materialistic approach or a specific civilization that's quote unquote made it in modern day terms, is again as starting from within, right? So as I reflect internally as a human being, because I want something to not end, and that's what I believe Yusuf was pointing out, that eternal sustenance, which basically means that my end goal, my destination, does not necessarily have a particular end, which means it's ever growing. And I was looking into, like, just for the sake of it, I was looking into the definition of what progress, or how progress is currently defined, and it said onward movement towards a destination, right? So that onward movement, meaning that progressing or advancing towards the destination, and if the destination is not necessarily something which is going to have an end, which is ever growing, then the true progress must be something which allows me to constantly keep advancing, without ever feeling that I've reached a destination and there's no more advancement to be made. So this is where, again, the true progress must be when I, direct these faculties towards a source that can sustain it eternally. And I, as I read further into that sentence, I have another question. It says, and for each to be occupied with the particular duty of worship worthy of it. And I understand half of that, but not completely. So basically, again, to rephrase, true progress is when I'm using or directing these faculties towards an eternal source, and for them to be occupied. And I'm replacing the word occupied here with utilized, for my understanding's sake. So if I utilize these faculties, what I don't understand is what the author means by with the particular duty of worship worthy of it. Does anyone have any thoughts on what that means to them?
What comes to my mind right now is anything in creation or that is being utilized needs to be attributed to some source. And so if I just look at just something simple like my power of sight, it's given to me to be used. I mean, it's a need. It's a need to be used. And so it can only be utilized in a proper way when it's I guess when it's attributed to its true source of origin. So I just don't happen to have eyeballs and just like, utilizing them. No, it's there's something more to it. I mean, how do I explain the existence of the power of sight first of all? And so that's what I understand. And similarly with all the other faculties as well, whatever we're given, they're all in need to be utilized. But hey, the question is, in what, who's, I won't jump into in whose name am I utilizing them, but what is the objectives? What are my objectives, or what is my true objective to be utilizing them?
It's thank you for sharing that. It definitely gave me, or I guess brought an interesting example to my mind, which is I guess I'm going to try to rephrase this in a different way and then try to give an example. So again, like for me to utilize a faculty or ability or feeling or intellect or quality towards recognizing something which is worth being recognized. And the example that comes to my mind is in the film industry, I guess. Back in the day when we had cameras that were not high resolution, they basically would only be able to capture video to a certain number of frames per second. So if something would move super fast, you could only see it as clearly as the camera was able to recognize or capture that. But then the industry made advancements towards the cameras, and they made it like high definition, and they're able to like record more frames per second. I'm not an expert in camera terminology, but that's how I just understand it. So now that they're able to capture more frames per second, something which went the same thing, which went as fast as it did before, the camera is now better able to recognize that. And in that recognition, you're basically saying that this camera is worthy of being the camera to record, I don't know, let's say a bullet going across a field, or some rabbit running across the yard, basically. So in a way, tying it back to the human, like my existence and the faculties that I find myself with, the I that you were referring to, Fariha, it's like, okay, this quality that I'm given with power of sight, it must be like, I guess it's only worthy of me having this power of sight if it allows me to recognize what needs to be recognized, what is worthy of being recognized, and that's how I understand worship, right? Like acknowledgement. So does that make sense? Does anyone have any comments on that?
Sure, yeah, that's another way to look at it. Utilizing it to recognize something that's worthy of recognition, definitely.
Sorry, what was that?
Yes, I said that what you said really makes sense, utilizing the power of sight for something, for the sole purpose of recognizing the true object of worship, or that which is worthy to be recognized.
So just to add to all this, so the true progress is to turn the faces of all these faculties, heart, spirit, intellect. This ties back to, I think, the second remark, how in the first paragraph, the author was mentioning about one face is to, have the egoistic side of an egoistic view, right? Basically attributing all these qualities to either themselves or the being who has them, and not really appreciating them and seeing who the source is, which is the second phase of what I think we discussed about this, that where man is questioning and he's discovering himself with these qualities, and now he is asking, okay, why do I have these? So what is the purpose behind having all these? And that allows man to actually go and discover, basically become a mirror, as the example was given, and see that what these manifestations, using all these, the heart and the spirit, all these faculties, how these, what these feelings, what these senses are actually pointing to, right? And that's how I'm able to go to from the manifestation, acting as all these tools, the eyes that were given, the nose, the ears, my, sense of love, my whatever sense of security, all these are manifestations, and they're making me reflect and think in terms of what their purpose is. And that's how I am able to make progress. All right.
Okay.
I have a question, and I guess I'm playing devil's advocate.
You're not meant to ask questions, man.
Yeah, maybe
This must be a sign.
Is it working? So I'd love it if you guys could enlighten me or give me some ideas how I can understand this better. But how is there, here it says true progress, but in a way, there's no such thing as true progress. And the reason I say this is because, there's this God that's created us, this absolutely powerful God. And let's say that evil had some power and good had some power, and we were created and we need to be good and we have to fight against evil, right? So maybe you could say there's true progress here, because there's no absolute power that controls everything there. But in this thing we live in right now, there's absolute power. He created us. And it's like an artificial game that we're in. It's just simulated. We're supposed to get better somehow, and then we get closer to him. But even then, that's just artificial, kind of. Like, there's no actually true progress. It's just a simulated game in a way.
So what's the progress in that?
So I'm asking, how could there be true progress then? Like, what's this progress? Yeah.
You are asking this question and you are basing that questions on the fact that evil has no power.
Evil has no. It's just there's only one power.
And he's the only one.
He's the only one.
And then where the progress is?
Yeah, it's
because somebody already defined it for you already. Like him being the absolute power, he has already defined the life that you are gonna live. Is that where the question is coming from?
What am I adding? I can't add anything. Whether or not I exist has no value, because there's already an absolute power. There's absolute everything. So me doing something or not doing something doesn't really add anything. There's no progress. I neither take away or give. So
But what are you planning to increase?
Does my existence please God? Obviously not.
From your perspective, again, we are speaking everything from your perspective. So are you going to increase or not? Because when there is no belief, then you are very much a limited being and you are going to rot. So you are limited and you are dying, right?
Yes.
But with belief, the author's claim is you are going to become, in a sense, with the abuse of word, never dying or unlimited, or let's use a maybe better word, you're going to reach eternity. From your perspective, isn't this increment?
Sure, but it's an illusion though. For me, yes, I guess.
Why is it an illusion?
It's like an illusion of, I don't know.
So in what sense illusion? Is it like, actually I am not going to reach eternity, but I pretend as if I am going to reach eternity? Is this the definition of belief? I hope that I will reach eternity or what? So I guess the question is, how does belief convert your limitedness into some unlimitedness? I guess this is what I'm reading out of your question. If we answer this question properly, then your question should be answered, I guess.
I mean, I suppose, yes, for us it is progress, but is that fulfilling progress? Just for you it's progress, but that's it? Like, does that sound like progress?
What else is progress? I mean, I am looking for my self-fulfillment. This is the end of the story.
When you talk about progress, like, do you mean something that there is something missing in the creation that you should be adding something to it that will...
That's my definition of progress.
That will be complete?
If somehow I could contribute to creation by being good, then that would be some form of progress, yes. But I can't contribute.
But I think, like, here the progress is defined like solely on your own, like, being in your own being as a self. It's not an like external thing. It is within yourself. It's a process that takes within yourself. Like, I think extracting the potentiality that you have, like, that's what belief does for you. And like consciousness of that is an like journey that you take, like, and it is a progress, like, in your understanding, in your consciousness.
Yeah, I guess there's personal progress. I didn't see it that way.
But like, I think as far as like existentially speaking, you cannot subtract anything from creation, or you cannot add anything to creation to perfect it.
Yeah.
You have absolutely no say in that. I guess, like, in that sense, like, I can understand your question, where it's coming from. But I don't think that's what is being discussed, like, in the text, though.
It's just, even in a personal level, progress, that's what it meant for me. Like, even in self-progress, adding something. But even if I'm not adding something, I guess there's self-progress, which does mean something. So my definition was just wrong. Okay, thank you.
I would say any kind of feeling one has always start with questioning this feeling. And I feel that it's in human nature to have this feeling to prosper, to progress in something. And definitely everyone is given the need to progress. But then we have to ask ourselves the end goal. What is it? What are my objectives to progress or to achieve, to develop? What is it? What is my end goal actually? And I guess just, and then to answer this question, then one has to start with their own existence in terms of what am I? Who am I as a created being? And so it's like a steady process. So as one develops, then they should be able to answer the question of what are my objectives to progress, or what is my end goal towards progress, if that makes any sense.
So as a moderator, I'll quickly read Fariha's comment as well, which is pertaining to the similar topic, that knock down anything evil and you will realize that nothing is evil. It was just a perception. And it's interesting that you say this, Fariha, because this reminds me of this example or analogy that, not even an analogy, just an example that I was, I think I had mentioned it to the group earlier, but not sure. This again pertains to progress as well. So whoever asked the question earlier, I think this might address it, hopefully, inshallah. So one, I think it's very important to distinguish material progress from, again, our human concerns, like our existential progress. And the example that, I was reflecting on earlier was, if someone has a seed in their hand and asks me, what do you see? I'll say it's a seed. And, because that's all I understand. That's all I can understand materially for that thing to be. Then that person does the same thing again. Next day comes up with a seed in their hand and says, what do you see? And I say, it's a seed. The third day, the person educates me and says, look, if you plant the seed and, under the soil, water it, sunlight, so on and so forth, try it out, and it turns into a beautiful flower. The person demonstrates this to me, and then comes back, the next day and says, what do you see? Like, what's in my hand? With the same seed in their hand. Now, materially, it is still a seed. At an existential level, because of my understanding and not limiting it to, injecting any evil understanding and not limiting it to my perception, enhancing my perception by understanding, so as the author states, turning the faces of these faculties towards their purpose, I guess. I now look at the very exact same seed and say, well, this is a flower at an early stage, from a materialistic point of view, the things don't necessarily need to quote unquote progress. But at an existential level, because of my understanding enhancing, I am able to extract a much more enhanced, better utilization of the exact same condition that there is or was. And personally, for me, I think that's progress. And I think, again, like materially, it does not need to change at all. It may, again, like, if you water it and if you project like sunlight and so on and so forth to that seed, materially it may change as well, but it doesn't need to, for you to be able to make the existential progress, which is, again, what our humanity kind of looks or wants to address. And that, in that, I guess, experiment, if you will, or in that realization of its entirety, you're like, wow, like I've made progress just by enhancing my understanding.
This actually reminds me of a saying from a famous person from the past or historical figure. And I'm not sure, but what I remembered, the saying goes something of this, like this: if you seek material progress, you will lose your soul. So it goes along that line. And I was thinking, yeah, that's interesting. So what is the other kind of progress that I should be seeking? Or definitely there must be another kind of progress as well, besides the material progress, which kind of engulfs us. Basically, yeah.
Thank you. I was going to add to that and say that by having, I guess, I'm just calling this existential progress for now. By having existential progress, you do not need material progress in order to be content or satisfied with your existence. However, now if you flip this scenario around, you can have material progress, and if you don't have existential progress, you cannot be satisfied or content, again, with your existence. And the example that I recently came across was, and it was very puzzling, was this author says, he describes life according to his understanding, and he says, you're hanging by this branch, and they're basically two mice or mouse just running around the branch, eating at it, basically. And below you, as you're hanging from this branch, below you there is a dragon that's just waiting for you to fall so it can eat you. And on the branch itself, there are leaves, and there's honey dripping from the leaves. And if you lick it, it's very sweet. And then the author points towards the mice and says that there's a black mice and a white mice, and they're both are night and day. They're slowly and gradually eating away this branch that you're hanging from. And eventually you know that you're going to fall from this branch and there's a dragon waiting for you down there. In the meantime, you can basically reach out and try to lick the honey that's dripping from the leaves and taste the sweetness of the honey. However, if, again, because now I want to tie this into the existential versus material progress, is like tasting that honey is going to be that material progress. It's going to give you that quick satisfaction, that temporary satisfaction. But it doesn't change your existential concerns, which is the fact that there is a dragon waiting down there for you. It was puzzling for me because I was like, what is a way to approach this particular example, because there is a dragon below me? And I realized, at least from my perspective, is that existential progress is in, again, understanding that there is no dragon. You know, it's again, that evil dragon that I injected in this thing called life is, again, my construct. It's just a perception. And by enhancing my perception, by not calling a seed just a seed, but rather an early stage of a flower, by looking at this thing which may seem as a dragon, not as a dragon, at that point, I've addressed my existential concerns. And I don't need to even taste the sweetness of the honey that's dripping from the leaves to be able to be content and satisfied with my existence. So, you know, it's interesting how addressing existential concerns does not require any change of your material existence or material aspect of life. But the other way around, it definitely necessitates that existential concerns must be addressed for you to be able to, I guess, be content or exist with happiness eternally.
Shall we continue with the paragraph?
Yes. Okay. If there are no more questions, I guess the later half of that paragraph kind of addresses, I guess, maybe that tree example that I was just giving. Progress is not, as the people of misguidance imagine, to plunge into the life of this world in all its minute details, and in order to taste every sort of pleasure, even the basest, make subject to the evil commanding soul all the subtle faculties and the heart and intellect, and make them assist it. To do this is not progress, it is decline. I saw this, in fact, in a vision which is described in the following comparison. In the comparison, I guess we can dive into that later if there are no more questions. But again, I feel like this later half of this paragraph is kind of pointing towards the same things, is that, again, if you direct your energy towards, you know, kind of tasting the honey dripping from the leaves, as opposed to directing it towards enhancing your perception about that dragon, which, you know, kind of represents death or your, I guess, your existential concerns, you're never going to be able to make progress. It's a decline in the essence that it's not addressing your existential growth or progress. Are there any comments or questions on this? Always good to have a silent crowd. Okay. So I guess we can use the remaining time to cover the example that the author kind of dives into next.
Sorry, just to add, since you were saying everybody's silent, I think he mentions again in this paragraph about the, you know, like how we can divert all these heart, spirit, intellect, all these faculties, either to recognize and go for the eternity, recognize the source of them, or we can make them subject, which is to the evil commanding soul, as the author puts it, which is the focus of life of this world. He says, progress is not, as the people of misguidance imagine, to plunge into the life of this world. So I think that distinction is being made pretty clear, that true progress is to turn the face towards recognizing who the owner is, which is basically keeping ourselves busy, all these faculties and tools that we're given. That's how I understand the word occupy. So keep occupying ourselves and at least keeping ourselves busy in terms of turning that face towards recognizing who the owner is, versus keeping ourselves busy, on the other hand, with as everybody was saying, about the material progress. And that's how the material progress basically is something that is referred to as all our faculties are made subject to the evil commanding soul. So we are all utilizing everything, the human qualities and abilities that we have, and just using that for a temporary kind of existence that we know is not going to last, and it's definitely not going to help us for our desires for eternity. Yeah, just to add.
Yeah, thank you for adding that. I think I would want to kind of build on that as well, and say that it's not necessarily saying, in my view, it's not necessarily saying that don't or ignore the life of this world, but rather, in my opinion, it's saying that through the life of this world, like, don't limit your existence, or don't limit the energy or the utilization of the faculties to this world. Because again, to get to know the creator of something, you have to deal and experience with the creation of that creator. Like, I can only discover the artist as much as I am able to perceive and interact with the art. And the moment I attribute, and I think this is the point that Austin was trying to make, so the moment I attribute the I guess pleasures to the art itself, or to the life of this world itself, at that moment I've basically utilized, or not utilized, abused or misused the utilization of the faculties, and use them to assist towards the quote-unquote evil commanding soul, by attributing things to the life itself, but not the originator or the source of that life. To the artist. Okay. So I think we've made it clear that we shouldn't attribute it to the art itself, but to the artist. And in order to get to the artist, we must study the art, inshallah.
Yeah. Otherwise, as the author puts it, becomes a decline and not progress. Decline for the human being if we don't find who the artist is, and we just lose ourselves in the art. There is no progress made, and we just stay there at the level of, yeah, the art, the art is beautiful, yeah, I like it, but then that's it. No, we don't question who the artist is.
Absolutely. Okay, does anyone have any other questions, comments, concerns so far? Okay. So I would like to get everyone's opinion in terms of how we should read or how we should approach the next example that the author gives, since it is similar to what we've understood so far, but it is a different example. Would anyone like to kind of have a particular approach, or should we go over it at a high level?
We have 3 more minutes left, so I don't know, what does everybody else think?
I think we have 33 minutes. Or was it 3?
I guess it's 3.
Okay, so I propose that we can quickly read over it, since we've read over it last time, and at a high level maybe discuss it, and if there are more things to be discussed, then we can discuss it in the next discussion.
So We started at 7:30, so we should finish somewhere around 9:30, I guess. So we have half an hour. So I would suggest reading the two paragraphs and then read author's own interpretation for the metaphor and go through his interpretation. And if anybody would like to add anything on top of this interpretation, we can go with that. How does it sound?
I would like to ask everyone if that works for them. The timings to 9:30. Okay, so it looks like people are okay with it. I will read the next paragraph, which is the author is now taking pretty much everything into account what we've discussed so far as the second remark is concerned, and is putting it together in the following comparison. And the author says, I was entering a large town when I looked and saw it was full of large palaces. At the doors of some of these palaces was merrymaking like a brilliant theater. It captured and held everyone's attention and was entertaining them. I looked carefully and saw that the lord of such a palace had come to the door. He was playing with a dog and assisting the merrymaking. The ladies were indulging in the sweet conversation with ill-mannered youths. Grown-up girls were organizing children's games, and the doorkeeper had taken the role of directing the others. I then realized that the inside of the huge palace was completely empty. Its refined duties all remained undone. The morals of its inhabitants had declined so that they had taken on these roles at the door. I passed on until I came to another large palace. I saw that there was a faithful dog stretched out at the door and a stern and taciturn doorkeeper. It had an undistinguished appearance. I was curious, why was the other the way it was, and this palace like this? I went inside. Then I saw that the inside was very merry. Apartment over apartment, the people of the palace were busy with their different refined duties. The men in the first apartment were overseeing administration and running of the palace. In the apartment over that, girls were teaching the children. Above that, the ladies were occupied with fine arts and beautiful embroideries. And on the top floor, the lord was exchanging news with the king and was busy with his own elevated duties in order to maintain the people's tranquility and his own attainments and progress. They did not stop me, since I was not visible to them, and I was able to wander around. Then I came out and looked around everywhere in the town where these two sorts of palaces. I asked about this, and they told me. The palaces where there is merrymaking at the door and whose insides are empty belong to the foremost of the unbelievers and the people of misguidance. The others belong to honorable Muslim notables. Then in the corner I came across a palace on which was written my name, Said. I was curious. I looked more closely, and I as though saw my image on it. Calling out in utter bewilderment, I came to my senses and awoke. Now I shall interpret this vision for you. May God cause good to come out of it. The town was human social life, and the city of man's civilization. Each of the palaces was a human being, and the people of the palaces were the subtle faculties in man, like the eyes, ears, heart, inner heart, spirit, intellect, and things like the soul and caprice, and powers of lust and anger. Each of man's faculties has a different duty of worship. Each of man's faculties has a different duty of worship and different pleasures and pains. The soul and caprice and powers of lust and anger are like the doorkeeper and the dog. Thus, to make the elevated subtle faculties subject to the soul and caprice and make them forget their fundamental duties is certainly decline and not progress. You can interpret the rest for yourself. So I guess before we dive into the details at a high level, it seems like the author did kind of put things into perspective for us from I guess his or her interpretation, or his interpretation, by kind of defining how people can use their faculties, or how humans can use their faculties for the causes that, or I guess for the reasons that they have been created for. So one can either use them or not use them at all, which seems like the first palace that the author went to, no one was pretty much doing their duties. Like everyone was busy in things that were not concerned, I guess, with them, or were not, I guess they were not meant for those purposes. And that was leading to how did the word as the author says, its refined duties all remained undone. So the duties that people had were just being left undone. And in the second palace, it seems like because there was that order, because of people following the refined duties, the author saw, how did he phrase it? In order to maintain the people's tranquility. So I guess what I understand from that again is that in that order, there is tranquility, there is growth, there is satisfaction, and in fulfilling the purpose, again, there is growth. So I guess at a high level, this is what I understand. I would like to hear other people's thoughts.
No, I'm thinking, what does the author means by refined duties? Because definitely there's a comparison being made between both palaces. One of them had refined duties which are undone, while the other one, that's not it. It's being utilized. And so I'm thinking, if we were to connect this back to the progress, so if something is undone, then you're kind of stuck like in an infinite loop where you're not making any kind of true progress. You're just rotating in a vicious circle, as opposed to if you are able to utilize everything, like the author started off, how man has two faces. So if you're able to attribute or use all your faculties for its true purpose, then you're really refining your duties for their true purpose.
What I understand from refined duties is using the faculty for the intended purpose that it has been created for. Now, I know the follow-up question can be, well, how do I know what it's been intended for? Isn't that diving into the, from the creator's perspective? Like, how do I know my eyes are supposed to only do this and not do that? And I think that it can be to ignore looking at it from the creator's perspective, to look at it from my perspective, because these faculties are given to me within me for utilization. Through experimentation or through the utilization, I can discover them, right? And I guess, again, like if I'm thirsty, showing me a picture of a glass of water is not going to quench my thirst. I need to drink it. And I think that, again, like, I cannot use my eyes to fulfill my thirst. Just as how I cannot, use, again, like my ears to fill this need of, feeling compassion or anger to maybe, again, I might be going wrong here, but I cannot use anger for justice. I might have to use intellect instead. So it's it's using the faculties for the purpose that they're, again, kind of like meant for, if that helps.
Yeah, so I'm going to take your water analogy. So one, the inhabitants of one palace are using the water just for the sake of quenching their thirst, while the inhabitants of the other palace are using water as a way of attributing or recognizing the various qualities. So they're recognizing their need and recognizing that within the order and creation, there's water available. And so, there must be a merciful one who's taking care of me. So that's how I would compare these two analogies.
Right. I think the author kind of answers your question as well when the text states that each of man's faculties has a different duty of worship. So each of these qualities, again, like going back to that camera example, has the ability to recognize or appreciate and acknowledge some quality, of its maker. So again, like through intellect, I can acknowledge the quality of my creator's wisdom, right? Like, so I think, again, it's using these qualities for their intended purpose. Also, I wanted to, just for the sake of a challenging thought as I'm thinking it out loud here, is, can these qualities be used interchangeably for not their intended purpose? Like, what if I use, again, like a simple example would be like eyes to fulfill or quench my thirst. Like, it just cannot, right? Like, I need to drink water to fulfill my thirst. Looking at it will not work. So what happens if I misuse intellect instead of like the intended purpose for what anger was created for? So again, I think it might lead to a certain level of acknowledgement still, but not to its proper or utmost level of fulfillment. It's, I guess what I'm trying to say is that I can pick up a rock and try to hammer the nail into the wall, or I can pick an actual hammer for the purpose that it's been intended for and try to hammer the nail in properly. There's probably going to be more collateral damage, if you will, if I used a rock instead. I might not learn from that experience. I might, hurt my finger or something like that with the analogy. So I think just like that, if I personally, the one that I struggle with the most is justice, right? Like, is that driven by intellect or is that driven by anger? And I feel that every time I use anger to kind of establish the need or want to see justice prevail, there's more collateral damage than had I used intellect. So I think I just wanted to throw that out there, that again, like using these qualities interchangeably may lead to the fulfillment of the purpose to a much lower extent had we, I guess, used the true quality or the intended quality for its purpose instead. Okay. Doesn't look like anyone has any additional thoughts. Any other questions, I guess, up until everything we've read so far, something which may seem a bit far-fetched, remotely touches to the topic, we can discuss that as well. All right. As a moderator, I think we can read a little bit of the next text, and that people can think over it before we, I guess, read it in detail. Next discussion. Are people okay with that?
Here is a question.
Yeah, I want to get some thoughts out of some people next to me. So I want to ask them a question, or online, of course. But so here, apparently, these people outside of the palace, who are just playing around and having fun. Seemingly, in my eyes, they're perfectly fine with how they exist. And in the other one, they're in a palace and they're existing. Okay, they seem perfectly fine too. I mean, so what that they can sew some clothes or they have some form of order, like, so what? That doesn't mean that they're any more happier than the other people who are outside and they're happy. So why can't you directly just go up to them and say that they're not fulfilling their purpose if those guys seem happy? But I guess this is an analogy, so you could blame the analogy. And here it also talks about fulfilling like your true purpose, which I guess I still have a problem with this. Kind of like, what is your true purpose? Could you explain that to me? Yes, yeah.
So what I think about this true purpose is whatever satisfies you. And if following quote unquote
Too vague description for you.
worldly life, let's say, I mean the way that we know about worldly life. If, for example, driving a Ferrari satisfies you, truly satisfies you, then go for it. Truly go for it.
If you have the money.
If you have the money
to pay for it.
Whatever you have in terms of your wealth, or even, I mean, even if you have enough money for Ferrari, because within your conditions, whatever you have in terms of wealth, if it satisfies you, then you should be okay. If you think that, well, when I get enough money for Ferrari, I am going to be satisfied, then it's obvious that this is a fake notion, because you can imagine yourself, whatever, if you have $5 in your pocket now, imagine someone who has only $1 in his pocket. Maybe he's thinking that if I get $5, I'm going to be happy. And now we are at the level of $5 and still you are looking up, which means that this sort of a thing, you can extrapolate it, is not satisfactory. I mean, you can keep postponing it, saying that one day I'm going to attain this satisfaction. But based on my personal life experience going back, this sort of a thing never satisfied me. And in the future, I do not have any hope that it's going to satisfy me anyways, because you keep repeating the same experience day in and day out. And this is why the search is for finding the satisfaction. And once I find some satisfaction, I would say now it makes sense, or now this is a perfect match. Yeah, there's those, Osman Abi uses this word, aha moments. You just happen to know that that's it. Sometimes it happens, right? So whatever makes me say, that's it, this is what I'm looking for. And I guess in here, the author is claiming that the eternal aspect of beings, or the meaning, we keep using this term, the meaning is what makes you say, that's the truth. So I guess just look for it. But if you ask me to define what it is, I'm going to define what it is for me. So every individual needs to search for what will make them say, that's the truth. So it puts a lot of responsibility for every person. So there is no one cooked answer. And I can share my cooked answer with you, but it's not going to be your answer anyways. So I guess there's no easy answer to this question. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I would like to add, sorry, I think someone else was going to say something, which is rare. So I'll let you guys speak first. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to add something real quick. Regarding the notion of happiness that the brother with the question had asked, it's interesting to me because the author says that in the first palace that he gives an example of, that, these people are being entertained as if it's like a theater. And certainly that can qualify as a type of happiness, but as I was kind of reflecting over this, I thought about how I can bring it to my life, and my life is mostly made up of writing papers currently. So there are two types of happiness that I can obtain. One, I can procrastinate and I can neglect my potential of writing a paper by Netflixing and watching a TV show, and certainly I will be entertained and I will be happy in one respect. But that happiness is also a type of distraction and of dulling the pain of unfulfilling the potential of my given faculties in a way that will actually make me happy. If I do utilize my human qualities or faculties, in this case, potentiality of being able to write a paper, that will also give me a sense of happiness, because within the sense of fully utilizing my given abilities, let's say, I feel a sense of fulfillment and happiness in and of that self. So I think it's important to be careful in terms of defining what brings about happiness, and then also being careful in terms of thinking about if happiness is the objective, and again, which type of happiness is temporary and which one is in alignment with the way that I am actually created. That may not directly answer the question that was raised, but I feel that helps me connect it on a very practical level for myself, to say the least.
So the problem I see so what makes me happy is worshiping God. So that's why I worship God. But also what makes me happy, because these people aren't just crazy that they're all living life without maybe believing God or worshiping God. And I see it in myself. Like when I get a very good grade on tests, or I achieve some form of success, material success that everyone tells me is success, I feel extremely happy. And it's not fake happiness. It's not a distraction. It's very real happiness. Like when I'm watching a TV show, yes, that is maybe a distracted happiness, and I don't feel happy. But when I achieve success, material success, I feel extremely happy. And how can we say this happiness is actually not true happiness? Okay, maybe it goes away. It doesn't last forever, but you can get it back. Just as in a religion, you can get it back and it goes away. So how do you make that distinction to say worship is what makes me happy, so that's why I worship?
I think that's a very common and human question to ask. Like I asked this quite a lot as well, and I have a few points on this. They're not organized, or I guess well organized for that matter. So just bear with me if it sounds confusing, and feel free to ask or interrupt with follow-up questions or clarity. So one, I guess I learned this from medicine school, is that before you can solve a problem, you absolutely have to identify the root cause. You cannot, paste an answer to a question you don't understand. So that's why, again, I was appreciating the question here, because the question exists, but the root cause has to be identified. And I think what is being proposed here is, again, it seems perfectly fine that people that are in the first palace just doing things on ad hoc basis, unorganized, not fulfilling their duties. They still seem, quote unquote, happy. So what's wrong with that approach? And I think, again, if the understanding of one person is capped or limited to that, which does not, I guess, go beyond the basic level, right? So I guess this is a very normal example. So if I give an iPhone to a 2-year-old, they will play video games with it. Versus if I give the same iPhone to someone who's, I don't know, like 20, 30, hopefully they're still not playing video games, but they're probably going to use that phone for a different purpose. They're probably going to, I don't know, call someone or research something on it. And I think that in the understanding of the quality, right? That's what the palaces were referring to. In the understanding of what those qualities can do, their potential, which one through investigation comes to the conclusion that it's limitless. Through the understanding, or with the understanding, you will not be satisfied. It's harder to get satisfied with a more temporary or limited satisfaction, as opposed to a more everlasting, a more longer sustaining kind of satisfaction. And again, like I think I would tie it back to that seed example, right? So earlier I was asking, the person shows up and says, "What's in your hand?" And the person says it's a seed. And if you, let's say, if that seed is edible, you eat it, right? And if your understanding of that seed was that it's just a seed, you would eat it. But if your understanding enhanced to say, no, it could turn into, I don't know, some fruit, and it would have more seeds, and then I can have plant those seeds and get more fruits and eat some of those and some of the seeds as well. Then just by enhancing your understanding, your perception changes, and your utilization of that moment, right, that also changes. So now if I came to you, let's say we all love oranges, let's say I came to you with an orange seed, and let's say it's edible, and it's only one seed, how would you utilize it? How would you utilize it at that very moment? Would you just eat it, or would you say, no, let me go ahead and plant this so that I can get some multiple oranges out of it, and then maybe I'll eat some of the oranges and seeds, and maybe I'll plant the rest to keep the cycle going. So through understanding, your utilization changes, and you will not find, at least from my perspective, it's harder to find satisfaction with something which is more temporary, than while knowing, I guess, not then as if it's a comparison, while knowing that there's more that can be done with it. And I think this is the point that Yusuf was trying to make, was if you don't know, if you limit your satisfaction to just that Ferrari, or if you limit your satisfaction to just that eating of that seed, like, no, this, I just want that taste now. I don't care about not having the seed tomorrow. You would be satisfied for that moment, but what you're also doing in the process is ignoring your reality, which is, again, you will find yourself in the need of wanting to have that seed again, and wanting to have that satisfaction again. And then if you keep, this is Einstein's definition of madness, I guess, is to keep doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results, is madness. And if we keep utilizing our qualities the same way that we did yesterday, without trying to, I guess, satisfy this eternal satisfaction, eternal happiness that we're looking for, and keep doing that temporary, we're trying to fulfill that temporary satisfaction and expecting a different result, it's just not going to happen. Logically, it fails to fall through. However, in my personal investigation, I also realized that we can easily mimic and fake it. And what I mean by that is, by constantly using a quality to fulfill a temporary satisfaction every single day or every hour or so, I'm having so many of those temporary satisfactions to a point where it mimics that I'm having eternal satisfaction. But really what's happening is it's just numerous temporary satisfactions. And that, again, is the difference between, I guess, what Yusuf wrote in the comment box, like being happy versus being content. How I understand that to be is like, you could be happy for a moment, but to be content really means that you understand it to its utmost potential, or at least a potential which is higher than what you're utilizing it for at that moment.
جزاك الله خير. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. وآخر دعواهم أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. الفاتحة.